So today I'm going to be considering the early part of 1 Peter chapter 1, where it talks about how we have an inheritance reserved for us in heaven, and that we are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation. And that's great news, that we have this hope and expectation of eternity in heaven with God. But then it goes on to say that though now for a little while, if need be, we have been grieved by various trials. So while we're still here on earth, this side of glory, the verse tells us that we are going to go through some things. We're going to go through some trials. And the verse said, if need be. So that tells me that it's intentional, right? It's not an accident that we're going through trials. And why would we need to go through trials in this life? Well, Peter gives us the answer in verse 7. He says that the genuineness of our faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So gold is melted in fire or extreme heat. And the reason that is done is to get the impurities out of the gold so that it can be formed and fashioned into something beautiful. And we are tested in the same way, that the genuineness of our faith, while we're being tested, would come forth, and that we would be formed and fashioned to be more like Jesus Christ. And I heard somebody talking about someone who is a refiner of gold. And they put that gold in the fire and they take it out and they look at it and see, is it pure yet? And if it's not, they put it back in the fire. And they keep taking it out. And someone asked the refiner, well, how do you know when the gold is pure when it's done? And he said, when I can see my face again. And isn't that how God does, right? He keeps refining us until he sees the reflection of Christ in our lives and in our character. But they also said that the refiner never leaves the gold alone while it's in the fire. And isn't that like God? While we're being tested and tried, God is right there by our side. And I would say, doesn't he feel closest when we're in the fire? We're much more aware of God's presence when we're really deep in a trial, isn't it? That's when things are going good for us, we can tend to forget about God and go about our lives. But when we're in the fire, boy, don't we call out to him. Job, we know Job went through some stuff in his life, right? Job 23:10, he said, when he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. So when we go through trials, our faith is either going to be proved genuine if we press into God and allow him to use those circumstances to refine us and remove those impurities from our lives and our character, or we're going to focus on our circumstances and forget God and struggle along in our own strength and be overtaken by them and perhaps even become bitter, angry, and discouraged in the process. But it's easier said than done, isn't it? It takes discipline and choice when those trials come to focus our mind and our heart on the Lord and not on our circumstance. To instead seek his face to understand what is he doing in that trial and to lean on him and allow him to refine us. Instead of asking, why me and why is this happening to me? Maybe instead we can say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to teach me through this trial? Show me what needs refining in my life or in my character. And sometimes maybe that testing and that fire isn't for us. It's because someone else is watching and they're going to see how we go through that trial and come forth as gold, and it's going to have an impact on someone else's life. And I was thinking and praying about a woman of the Bible who exemplifies these ideas a woman who found God's purpose in her suffering and trials and who actively exercised her faith in the face of difficult circumstances. And the woman that God actually brought to my mind wasn't a woman from the pages of the Bible, but a woman who is living in our time. And her name is Johnny Erickson Tata. So I don't know if you all know her story. When Johnny Erickson Tata was 17 years old, she dove into the Chesapeake Bay, not realizing how shallow the water really was. She wound up fracturing her neck between the 4th and 5th vertebrae and became a quadriplegic. She is paralyzed from the shoulders down. And during her 2 years of rehabilitation, she said she had a lot of anger. She was depressed. She felt suicidal. She even had doubts in her faith. But during occupational therapy, she learned to paint with her mouth.
Wow.
With a brush between her teeth, and she began selling her artwork, and that was kind of a turning point for her. Today, she's an evangelical Christian author who has written over 40 books. She's recorded several musical albums. Even though she doesn't have full lung capacity because of her paralyzation, she still was able to sing praises to God. She starred in an autobiographical movie about her life. She's a radio host. She founded an organization called Joni and Friends, which is, a ministry to the disabled community. She's even partnered with people in prison to refurbish wheelchairs to make them available to people who couldn't afford them so that they could be mobile. But if her quadriplegia wasn't enough of a struggle, in 2018 she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. She went through chemotherapy and had a mastectomy, and she was declared cancer-free in 2015. That's a lot. Guess what? In November of 2018, she was diagnosed with a malignant nodule on her chest near where the original site of her cancer was. But in July of 2019, she was declared cancer-free yet again. And in the midst of her trials, instead of pulling up stakes, taking her ball, and going home and sulking, she exercised her faith, and she lets the struggles and trials of her life refine her faith and propel her forward. She was quoted as saying, "My weakness, that is my quadriplegia, is my greatest asset because it forces me into the arms of Christ every single morning when I get up." She can't dress herself, she can't wash herself, she's dependent on other people to do that for her. She struggles with pain. Each and every day, she's dependent on the Lord. And I want to share a couple of other quotes from Joni that just gives you an idea of the depth of the faith this woman has and how much she depends on the Lord. She said, "God is more concerned with conforming me to the likeness of his Son than leaving me in my comfort zones. God is more interested in inward qualities than outward circumstances. Things like refining my faith, humbling my heart, cleaning up my thought life, and strengthening my character." She also said, "Yes, I pray that my pain may be removed, that it might cease, but more so I pray for the strength to bear it, the grace to benefit from it, and the devotion to offer it up to God as a sacrifice of praise." She also said, "I want to stay in the habit of glancing at my problems and gazing at my Lord." And there are so many more. You can read more about her story or her quotes or one of the many books that she's written. But I want to close with this quote that really impacted me. She said, "This is the only time in history when I get to fight for God. This is the only part of my eternal story when I'm actually in the battle. Once I die, I'll be in celebration mode, in a glorified body, in a whole new set of circumstances. But this is my limited window of opportunity, and I'm going to fight the good fight for all that I'm worth. That quote brings me back to those verses in 1 Peter. I get the sense that Joni knows that she has an eternal inheritance reserved for her in heaven, and that is her ultimate hope. But while she's on this earth, she is going to embrace the trials and challenges, allowing God to mold and shape and refine her into the image of his Son, all while relying on him to give her what she needs to be used for his glory and his purposes in the earth. I share her testimony to encourage us that if Joni can do it with all the struggles and challenges that she faces day by day, that we can do it too. Mm-hmm. And just like God has given her all that she needs to fight the good fight of faith, he can do it for us too. So let us press into God, who is the author and